Hi, my name is Daudi Mugabe and this is Business Mike episode 8. My guest today is a human resource consultant named Alex Mukiibi. In this episode, Alex shares some tips on how candidates can prepare for a job interview, the common questions asked during an interview and how to answer them. All this and more next on Business Mike. Thank you so much, Alex, for taking out the time to be here today. Could you briefly tell us who you are and what you do?
Thank you, Daudi. My name is Alex Mukiibi. I'm a human resource consultant, and my niche is talent assessment and management. Personality-wise, I'm an introvert, but I also enjoy talking to people, and I derive quite a bit of satisfaction from helping others. I'm a trained and certified interviewer. To date, I've interviewed over 5,000 people.
Wow.
At all levels, from entry-level, middle-level management, top management, even board members. I've done this for the last 8 years in over 30 companies and institutions, NGOs, non-government organizations, personal businesses, private businesses, corporate companies, name it. That's briefly who I am.
Okay. Now, this interview in particular is going to be slightly different from the ones I normally hold because of the type of job you have. I think this is an important topic. So I'm basically going to ask you a few questions that aren't necessarily about your business or your experience, but just certain tips and advice that you can give us that involves the whole process of interviewing and writing a CV. So I would like to start off by asking, how can we prepare for an interview? What goes into preparation for an interview?
So quickly into preparation. If you cannot prove it within the average interview time allowed, do not talk about it. That's a rule of thumb for any interview. If you can't prove it, do not talk about it. For any interview, you need to understand the job you are interviewing for. Understand what the roles and responsibilities are for this job. Understand what kind of tasks you will have to perform. For example, if you have the role of human resource manager, in the next 5 years when the company expands, perhaps opens up new branches or employs more staff, is this job likely to change? If so, how? Consider all those factors in trying to understand what this job is about. Secondly, when preparing for an interview, steer clear of anything emotional. By emotional, I mean you tend to hear people talk about patience, how patient they are. People talk about having integrity. People talk about being honest. And these may be desirable, but they're hard to prove. There are certain situations that you have to encounter for you to prove some of these emotional things. So steer clear of anything emotional and focus on skills, knowledge, and competencies which can be proved. Time management can be proved. Problem solving can be proved. Conflict resolution can be proved. Those are skills that can be proved. Knowledge of something can be proved. And you use your experience to prove these skills, knowledge and competencies. Be certain about where the interview will be and what time it will be held. I advise my clients to make a dry run to the venue of the interview, perhaps a day or two before the interviews take place. Make a dry run so that you prepare for the unexpected. It could be traffic jam, it could be a parking space, it could be the administrator that's supposed to help you, direct you, or advise you. It could be anything. Again, when you're preparing for an interview, prepare everything you need a day before, at least a day before. This refers to what you're going to wear. Also prepare your original documents, preferably laminated and filed. Prepare photocopies of those documents as well, preferably filed. Have them filed so that it shows you are structured. It shows, these are documents that are of value to you. Treat them as such. Also carry copies of your CV. It's important in case you have more than 2 interviewers and they don't have copies, you can offer a copy of the CV if they need it. Briefly, that's what I would say about preparing for an interview.
And what about mentally? For instance, sometimes you're asked to ask a question at the end of an interview. What sort of questions should we have in mind for the interviewers?
That's a very good question. It is an area that people tend to neglect. In preparation for the interview, it's advisable to prepare certain questions. This will take us back to the step number 1 when you're preparing. Understand the job very well. You can also go on to research a little bit about the company. You don't have to get facts and figures. You don't have to know who holds what position, but get the basic, look at their website, run by the company and pick up some brochures if they have any. If they have a company profile, have a read. But briefly, if you have to ask a question, ask questions that will help you understand the role better. Ask for the interviewer's perspective of the company. Ask questions that will push the interviewer to speak, to talk about the company, to talk more about the job for your better understanding. Ask questions that focus on how the company will benefit from you. Not the other way around, not how you will benefit from the company. So try and avoid questions like, how long before my salary is reviewed? Avoid questions that ask about what kind of perks will I get? Do I get a bonus? How much do I get? Avoid questions that are about what you will get from the company. Focus more on questions that will help you understand the role better. A good example of a question you could ask is, how will I be assessed? How will my performance be assessed? This will probably drive the interviewer to tell you about key performance indicators. It kind of points you in the direction on where to focus. Once you have this job, these are the areas that you need to focus on.
So what are some of the common questions that are asked during the interviews? I know there's a few of them. Number 1, what are the interviewers looking for when they ask these questions? And number 2, what's the best way to approach these questions? And you're going to take us through this, but just an example saying, what are your weaknesses?
There are some common interview questions, maybe about 5 or 6 that I know about, that chances are very high that they will be asked in an interview. Allow me to give you a simple formula for responding to these questions. As you prepare for your interview, 1, understand yourself thoroughly well. 2, understand the job. 3, make the connection between yourself and the job. Some candidates understand themselves very well. Some understand the job very well, but do not make the connection. You need to let the interviewer know that you know what the job requires. You know what you have, and it applies to the job. One of the most common interview questions is, tell us about yourself. When I train my clients, when I'm preparing them for interviews, my focus is to help them understand why these questions are asked, because it's from that understanding that you will be able to respond in a way that is customized to you, so that what the interviewer sees is exactly what they get. So tell us about yourself it could test for so many things. It tests for how you communicate. So again, in your CV, you may not need to necessarily say you have good communication skills. How you write your CV, how you structure your CV, and even more importantly, how you respond to my questions. Your information flows. You speak clearly, you're audible. Will tell me how you communicate. Now, tell us about yourself. Again, look at your CV. Let your CV be your guiding document. Talk about your skills. Talk about your knowledge. Talk about your competencies. It's the same story. Just briefly point out a few things. Talk about your education qualification. For example, you do not need to talk about your university degree, your secondary school, your O-level, A-level, nursery school, primary. No, just talk about your degree and upwards. Talk about what kind of training you have received. Again, everything in brief, because it's already there in your CV. Talk about your experience. What kind of experience do you have? But this experience must be relevant to the job. I advise my clients to look in the mirror and answer this question. If you don't like what you see in the mirror, chances are the interviewer will not like what they see. So answer this question over and over again in the mirror. Once you like what you see, you're confident you can speak without thinking too much. Let it flow. Let the information flow. So you need to prepare for that.
So it's basically a question that is to verify, are you who you say you are on paper?
Not necessarily. The whole interview might verify that. But this question is kind of an icebreaker, an introduction into your professional life. It sets the tone. And that's why I also believe that you can control an interview. This is where you start. You set the pace. You set the tone. You asked a very interesting question. What are your weaknesses?
Yes.
Again, as an interviewer, I no longer ask this question, but it does feature in most interviews. First of all, weaknesses, we need to define what a weakness is. A weakness is not something you can overcome overnight. People have to leave their families, have to leave their jobs, have to leave their friends to go and fight a weakness. People who have certain kinds of addictions. So a weakness is not something that you can fight overnight. I prefer to look at points of improvement or areas of improvement as opposed to weaknesses. So I would advise that you look at areas of improvement, because areas of improvement, again, are things you can prove. Many companies have performance appraisals. It's during these performance appraisals that your appraiser or your supervisor points out you're good in this area, but you need to improve in this area, you need to improve in that area. Now, it's those areas that you talk about in an interview because they can be proved. Because they're areas of improvement, it doesn't affect your prospective employer. There's light at the end of the tunnel, as opposed to a weakness. You know, if your weakness is temper, you may never resolve it, or it will take you a lifetime, or you might resolve it and it comes back. So I would prefer to avoid use of the word weaknesses, but that's how you can respond to that question. You have questions like, where do you see yourself in the next 5 years, 5 to 10 years? This question is really asking, what is your objective? That's all they're asking. I would like to know, is your objective in line with my objectives? Because that will be a basis on which I will need to consider whether our thoughts are in line for me to hire you. So if you want to be, and again with your objective, you need to be very careful what you say. Saying I want to be a general manager, or I want to be the finance director, or what if you're speaking to the finance director?
Yes.
What are the chances that he will actually say, please hire that guy? Try and avoid specific positions. Try and focus on what kind of skills you want to achieve. What kind of knowledge do you want to achieve? What kind of competences do you want to achieve in the next 5 years? For example, you might want to point out that you'd like to be an expert in administration in the next 5 years. But that is not enough if you do not illustrate how you're going to get there. So again, talk about how you intend to get there. And one of those ways to get there is through experience. Which experience this job can provide. So again, it could be an argument for you to want that job. And again, make sure that your objective is in line with the company objectives. Otherwise, you sort of, your chances are dim. Questions like, what are your strengths? What do you bring to the table? Why should we hire you? All those questions can be answered by strength. They're really just asking you, what are your strengths? So if I ask you, what are you bringing to the table? Again, focus on tangible skills, knowledge, competencies. If the job requires a specific kind of knowledge, for example, knowledge of the PPDA Act, that becomes a strength. If you are conversant, you don't have to know it by head, but you could have experience such that you know where to find what you need anytime. So now that becomes a strength. It's also tangible because it can be proved. So focus on things that are, one, necessary for the job, and two, are tangible for the job. I think those are the most common questions that I can come up with now.
So when it comes to looking for a candidate for a particular job or role, it could be in any industry. It could be a small to medium business or a large enterprise. How do you, or what methods would you suggest we can use to find suitable employees?
As an employer?
As an employer, yes.
Well, as an employer, there are three main points I would bring up in response to that. First of all, when you are looking for a candidate as an employer, you're looking for the most suitable as opposed to the best. The word best in recruitment is normally used to refer to someone who has scored highest in terms of points. But you might have experienced this or heard of this. It's not always that the best candidate is hired. Sometimes they hire the second best or even the third best candidate. So for an employer, it's you're looking for the most suitable candidate, and this could be based on so many things. It could be based on culture of the organization. It could be based on certain necessary skills or knowledge. The job might require a specific kind of knowledge that the best candidate simply doesn't have. So one, define the role accurately. If you get the role, the definition of the role wrong, you're setting up to fail right from the beginning. So the role has to be very well defined so that you find the right person to perform in that role. Two, advertise for this position so you can receive as many qualified applicants as possible. 70% of our jobs are not advertised, and the result of this is that you have the same pool of people running around in every organization. So you find Daudi Mugabi is the sales and marketing manager of UTL in 2012. Then in 2015 you read in the papers that Daudi Mugabi has been appointed sales and marketing manager of Stanbic Bank. So you have the same pool of people going around in the best companies because they haven't opened their application up to their positions up to other qualified candidates, and there are many qualified candidates. So advertise the position so you receive as many qualified candidates as possible. And lastly, deliberately prepare for the interview process. The interview process is supposed to provide a positive candidate experience. The candidate shouldn't feel intimidated. The candidate shouldn't curse why they came for this interview. So prepare questions. What kind of questions are you going to ask so that every candidate is given the same opportunity? Prepare who is going to conduct these interviews. Do not appoint an interviewer the morning before the interviews are supposed to take place. Prepare for the after process. Once the interviews are done, what do we do? Who does it? How do we assess? How do we decide? That kind of thing. So prepare. One of the biggest mistakes employers make is neglecting to prepare. I think in my view, it's probably the biggest mistake an employer can make. It doesn't matter if you're filling the position of a gate man or a security guard or a sales executive or a general manager. It doesn't matter. The same amount of preparation should be made.
Okay. Well, this is the last question. If you were the host of this show and I was your guest, what is the one question you'd ask me? Assuming this wasn't a job interview, of course.
The one question. We talked about this before.
Yes.
But I think you have a good idea. This idea that you're working on, the podcast idea. But I also can't help asking what triggered you to start this podcast. I mean, many people are searching for jobs. It's probably much easier to go out there and send your CV out there. I mean, what triggered this?
Actually, now that you mentioned it, I've answered this question before, but there was one factor that I missed or I left out, which was actually very important. The reason as to why I started this podcast was because I was inspired by other podcasts, business podcasts, that I would listen to for entrepreneurs, mostly in the United States. Now, the reason why I started listening to podcasts in the first place was because at a certain point in time, I was job searching.
Yes.
And I did a couple of interviews whereby on paper, I had everything right. I had, a bachelor's degree, I had an MBA, I had some certifications, but I lacked the experience.
Yes.
So over time I became frustrated with a lack of having, opportunities to, number one, get more interviews, and number two, when I get them, that inability to stand out as someone experienced. So I decided to enrich myself in terms of business knowledge, reading business books, watching programs, and somewhere on the way, on the internet, podcasts came up. So I discovered this thing called business podcasts. And I learned so many things that, have helped me, not necessarily to get a job in particular, but to help me in case I need to start my own business. And over time, I became fascinated by this, and slowly my mindset shifted from job hunting or searching to actually a job creation. Now, over time, I realized there is no podcast, particularly on the African continent, that discusses business like they are in the United States and Europe. So I wanted to create a platform where I can help aspiring entrepreneurs to learn and find resources for business and entrepreneurship in general, and also just to inspire people who want to start something, that they can do it, because this is something I've started out of a sheer will to, number one, inspire other people, number two, to make myself stand out as an individual. Because when I look back in time, for every job I would apply for, I was just another candidate. But if you have something about you that is significantly different from anyone else, that would make you stand out. And for me, a podcast was one of those things. For instance, if I'm now applying for a job and this podcast is broadcasted all over the world, the name might ring a bell, and that might play to my advantage, not just in case of applying for a job, but just doing business in general. So that is why I started the podcast. Number one, to inspire people. Number two, to push myself and see how far I can go with an idea that can inspire my community and the continent at large.
Well,
that's my.
I think you've answered it. I had a few more probing questions, but you've already responded to them.
All right. Now, lastly, how can people get in touch with you? How can they connect with you?
The best way to connect with me is through email. My email is alex@jeffandsanders.com. I also have another email, alexmukiibi@gmail.com. My Skype address is alex.mukiibi01. My website is www.jeffandsanders.com. And I also have a blog, alexmukiibi.wordpress.com.
Right. Okay. I'll put all this information on the show notes page. And will you be sharing a document for us, perhaps that has a highlight of some of the things we've discussed today?
Yes.
Certainly.
I can make that happen.
All right.
I would definitely be glad to share it with you, especially for reference. I'm sure it will be needed.
Okay. So I'll add that on the show notes page as well. Once again, thanks so much, Alex, for making this possible.
Thank you, Daudi. Thank you very much.
Have
It was
a very
pleasure.
nice day.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to Business Mike today. And if you'd like to listen to more episodes just like this one, simply go to businessmike.com. For all the links and resources mentioned in this particular episode, simply type the name Alex into the search bar to access his show notes page. Thanks again for listening today, and until next time, take care.